I love it. Wow.
Oh, you know it?
Yes, of course.
Really?
Yes.
It's always when I play this record, everybody asks me, who is this guy? Never heard him.
Yeah, but I'm not the youngest. Welkom bij Hifi Studio Wilbert. Ik heb een hele makkelijke dag, net als gisteren. We hebben iemand in het pand die dat veel beter kan dan wij. Hij gaat vertellen over zijn eigen luidsprekers. Roland Gauder gaat eerst op deze verdieping uitleggen zijn allerlaatste nieuwste model. Dit is echt het enige paar. De rest komt de komende weken aan. Dus het is echt nieuw. De serie hierboven, om een idee te geven, zit in de 4000 euro sfeer per paar. De serie hierboven hebben we de Viscosa van staan. En boven staat een Dark 200. En dat allemaal aangestuurd met mooie spullen. Daar hebben we het nu even niet over. Het gaat nu om de luidsprekers. Ik ga het woord geven.
Yeah, good morning again, yes. It's a long trip from Stuttgart to Utrecht. No, actually not. It's just the traffic, but today on Sunday it's much better going home. But I like to be here. I remember my first show was in Veldhoven in 97, something like that, yeah, really. And sometimes we had a good distributor here in Holland and in the Netherlands, and sometimes not. It always changes, of course. And now I'm happy to be here in Wilbert Studio, and I will show you something about our speaker program. This is just, like it was said, it's our latest design. We always say, okay, we try to give the best components, take the best components in our speakers, and to make the perfect sound. And so we normally choose these Acutone drivers like you have here in the Casiano, because they are made of ceramics. And there's a good reason for that. I started at Isophone, a German company which was founded in 1929. So actually it's 90 years ago. And I'm not that old. I'm not the founder. Don't be scared. But after my PhD in Stuttgart, I studied physics, and then I started there, and they just made everything by themselves. All the drivers, the woofers, mid-ranges, tweeters, and they used paper cones. Something like with a painting on it, and then as a tweeter we had a soft dome tweeter, a silk, which we coated a little to get it stiffer, and so that's how I started in my career. But after some years, you know, we always try to get better and to improve the products, and I found out that with paper I'm limited, because if you think of all the history in hi-fi we had, in the last 60 years we had made so many measurements, but always only frequency response. So that's what's printed in the magazines, the frequency response. And you have seen a lot of speakers which have a very, very good frequency response, but they sound totally different. And I was wondering why. Of course, and as a physicist, I'm just thinking about the Fourier transform, and from a frequency domain you go to the time domain. And then you see the impulse. You get an impulse in and an impulse out, and always this impulse coming out is distorted by some means. For example, the diaphragm cannot move like the impulse gets in. And this is what I found out with paper. It's soft material, it's a comfortably sounding material, but it cannot reproduce the high transients we have. And if you think of music, music is not a sine wave, never. It's always attacks, the drums, the guitars, the piano, or even the voice. We always have transients, never a sine tone. And so I thought, maybe we have done the wrong thing in hi-fi. We just always were addicted to get a flat frequency response. Many people did. But this didn't change the quality of the sound. The sound was so different from these speakers too. And then in 2001, we just started a project to create a diaphragm which is very, very stiff to reproduce the transients of music. But with paper, we immediately saw it was impossible. Then I checked around all the world, what's available on the world, and what material can be the best. And some people say Kevlar, some people say carbon fiber, and so on. What I found out is ceramics is by far the best material from a scientific point of view. You give in a transient and you measure what comes out from the diaphragm. And the ceramics was by far the best. And we thought about producing ceramic diaphragms at Isophone, but I went to Mr. Thiel in Germany, the owner of Accuton, who makes these ceramic drivers, and I asked him how he does it, and it's a terrible procedure. It's difficult. You take a titanium frame, put an aluminium foil in it, and then you put it into a bath with a big current running through it, and you make oxidization of aluminum to aluminum dioxide. And if you have ever done something like that, electrochemistry, it's like black magic. You never know what comes out. And then when it's ready, you have to put it into an oven and heat it up to 1,500 degrees to come from the aluminum phase to the ceramic phase. And then you have a ceramic diaphragm. And then you have to fix a voice coil, and it breaks soon, always. When you take such a diaphragm into the hand, you see it's light, weighs only a little, and it's so rigid and stiff. And you can give a transient on it, and these diaphragms, they just do it. They really do it. And the best, of course, is diamond. I remember in beginning of the 90s, I was invited for a talk about loudspeaker design in a German university. And I talked about the materials there and that we use paper and stiff. And then in the end, one student asked me, Mr. Gauder, what would be the best material for loudspeaker diaphragms? And I thought, yeah, of course, diamond. And everybody laughed. Because nobody could imagine that we could create a loudspeaker diaphragm of diamond. It's such big, this would cost a million. But now we can. Now we can. So you see, that's the progress which happened in hi-fi in the last 30, 40 years. We have now much better components, materials, and now we can really build the loudspeakers we have always dreamed of. And that's wonderful, really. That's from a scientific point of view, that's wonderful. And so in 2004, we just took these drivers from Thiel, and we had a good cooperation. He made it upon my requests. And in 2005, we had the first Casiano coming out with ceramic drivers and ceramic tweeter. And then 1 year later, we also had the diamond tweeter for the Casiano. And what you hear here is our latest model, the Arcona 60. And now we also have a ceramic tweeter here in the entry level. It took us 2 years to create this, but it's really a wonderful speaker now. And the first thing I really learned when I came to Isophone was the most important driver in a loudspeaker is the tweeter. I said, the tweeter? It only makes tss, 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 tss. Yes, but that's the important thing. In the beginning of music reproduction, we just wanted to have a system which shows the music in mono on one speaker. It's just the music. But then we found out there is also some information about the space where it's happening. And then it's the beginning of stereo. It was in '56. Mercury and Decca were the first companies to make stereo recordings, and just didn't really know what to do with this new technology at those times. Sometimes it's just like the Beatles, the guitar on the left and the singer on the right. It's terrible, I know. But there has been some progress all over the years, and now we know that with stereo we can make a real image in space and time for reproducing the music there. And that's our biggest goal in our company. We want to create speakers who really give a perfect illusion of the music, of the recording of the event which happened. And not only play music, but also give you the information about space and timing. That's very important, because if you close your eyes and you cannot distinguish if there is a real band or a speakers playing, then actually that's what we want. Then we come to the highest goal. We will never reach that, of course, but we always try to come as close as possible. And that's why we are building different series for starters, the entry level like this here. But you hear, it's really, really very close to the real original. And with the next speaker here, the Casiano we play soon, we have better materials. This is aluminum here, this is ceramic, and here we have a complete system with ceramic drivers. This is a 2.5-way system. So the woofers, they act together in bass, but for mid-range only the upper one is playing. And Casiano is a 3-way system. 3 ways means the woofers are only making bass, and the mids only mids, and the tweeter only highs. And it sounds really, really a little bit stupid, of course. What's the problem about this? The problem is that in analog technology, we only can create flat filters. I think you've heard about this before, because some companies make a religion about it. And if you say, okay, I take the woofer out at 180 with a normal 6 dB filter, then this means 180 is the crossover point, and then it slowly, slowly goes down. But you still can hear it at 3,000, 4,000 hertz, still, because it's so flat. And then the mid-range comes in at 180, and it comes in with 18 dBs or something like that, because 6 dB high pass is not possible. And then there is you go out with 6 dB, you come in with 18. It cannot be true, really. So that's the first critical point. That's the voices get disturbed and distorted. And the next problem is when you stop the mid-range at 3,000 or 4,000 hertz, it goes out flat, and the tweeter comes in with 18 dB, so there is the next connection point, which is really, really critical. And then at these crossover points, 2 sources radiate the sound. The mid-range and the tweeter, for example. 3,500, they are equally loud. So you have the same signal coming from 2 different diaphragms, from 2 different places. And then they interfere in the ear. And that's critical, of course, because they are different. But if you take this one out really hard and this one in really hard, so then you have a very, very small overlap only. And that's what we do. That's our big difference against any other competitor in the world. There is no other company who makes such steep filters. Normally, people like Dynaudio, they make 6 dB, some others do 12, and some do 18 dBs per octave. That's steeper. And we do 60 dBs per octave. 60. Really steep. And so we have a very, very small overlap. And this small overlap is very good for the phase information, so that there is a wavefront coming in, zack, to the ear, and we hear, now starts. And if the second information comes a little bit later and a little bit, then you get smeared impulses. Then the speakers sound a little bit boring and you have no real attack. And as I told you, the attack, for me, that's the most important thing in music. If they play a really romantic music, it's okay sometimes. But a big orchestra and fortissimo, that's great. Or if you hear drums when they come in, oh my God, that's music. That's music, and that's why I'm so addicted to the impulse response of the speakers. When you look at the magazines, sometimes you can see a waterfall diagram. You see this frequency over amplitude and then a three-dimensional plot where the resonances of the woofers and tweeters are shown. But this is just actually not so important. It's the roll-off. But the attack is on the other side of the diagram. And I always turn around the diagram by 180 degrees and look how fast can the tweeter and the mid-range really follow the impulse. This is like amplifiers, the rise time of an amplifier. And that's what I'm doing since many, many years, mathematics about calculating this. It's just when I was a student, actually in physics, I just was focused on Mercedes-Benz and Porsche at that time because I worked there in holiday. And I thought of going to the automobile industry, but then I went into the library and took all this literature about loudspeaker design. And I was amazed. In the 80s, there was really only a very, very small theory from Thiele and Small about loudspeaker design. And this was only a woofer and a cabinet, and that's all. There was nothing about crossovers. There was nothing about multi-way systems. Benson in the 80s made a small article about combining filters and drivers, but it was nothing really. And then I said, okay, maybe that's my opportunity. There's little knowledge only about theory and hi-fi and loudspeaker design. And that's why I came into this, because there was an open space. And now, after all these years, we are able to calculate a speaker like this in full. The Casiano, for example, has a 12 order bass reflex system. That means we have 12 equations, only for the bass. 12 equations, 12 variables, non-linear and coupled. So it's, from a mathematical point of view, it's really hard to solve such a set of equations. A normal bass reflex system is 4th order only. 4 equations, 4 variables, you can solve that by hand. But this is just too complicated to be solved by hand. You need good software and good computers, and with a PC, it's not possible to do that. The software is not mighty enough. But in Stuttgart, we have the biggest computer in Europe, a Cray computer, and we can rent there. They have 92,000 processors, and you can rent the processor €1 1 minute. So you say, okay, I take 60 processors, 1 minute, and you pay €60. But of course, you don't know how long it takes. And sometimes it's a surprise. Then I say, can I have, maybe you invite me for a talk, and then we forget about the thing. Or I hold some lessons in this university, and then we just forget about the invoice. But now we are able to do that. We can solve this. We can have I have a mathematical description for loudspeakers, and took me a really long time now. But we can do it now. We can calculate it as a whole system. And so that's no trial and error product. It's really, we know what we're doing. That's why our speakers sound very similar. You will hear it when we take this one and the next one. It's very, very similar. Just the difference is just between the size of the speaker and of the quality of the components chosen. We stop now with the Arcona, and now we try the Casiano. So, you see, it's not so heavy. So, we come to the Casiano. Casiano is a 3-bass speaker, as I told you before, with all ceramic drivers here. You can also take the diamond tweeter, but I would recommend you to take the ceramic tweeter first, and then listen for some time to get acquainted to it, and then try the diamond tweeter. It's the same money, but then you really know how good the diamond tweeter is. And I remember last time I did it, we went to a customer and put in the diamond tweeter and played, and he said, "Is it working?" Then I said, "Yes, it's working." Because the diamond tweeter is sounding really smooth and pleasant. So you think there is no tweeter working anymore. And that's the best thing that can happen with a loudspeaker. If you hear the bass, the mid, and the highs as separate drivers, that's terrible, because then the illusion disappears. It must sound like one small speaker. That's what we all try to do. But of course, one small speaker, you cannot make bass, you cannot make mids, you cannot make highs. So you have to use a 2-way or 2.5-way system, because the tweeter is the most important driver in a loudspeaker, and you need a tweeter. Many people try with broadband speakers and or with small mid-ranges, and they hope they make the highs good enough. But if you look at the attacks and the reverb going into the room, then you know what a good tweeter is really doing about. And so in the beginning, I also tried, many, many years ago, I tried with Broadway speakers, with broadband speakers, but you always have to have a tweeter. That's the truth about loudspeaker building. Okay, so make some music. No, I start. I have a chaotic order here in my pocket, because for every show I just go to my closet and take this, and sometimes it's a surprise what happens here inside. And I try to have everything, so from pop, jazz, classics, everything. And this is just a wonderful recording here for jazz, and it's so pleasant to listen. So we can get very close to the speaker. Many people say these hard materials like ceramic, they sound hard. And that's absolutely not true. I always fight against this prejudice, because they make everything right. They just follow the transients, and if the transients recorded are really high, then it's a heart attack by the music, and the musicians want that. Of course, you like it with a photographer. You can take a fading lens in front of it, and then everything is just fading around, and it's nice, but that's not the reality. The reality is take it off and look outside. And like it's here, it's like with music. And I have here a live recording from Niels Lofgren. I think you've heard it before, but I think you never heard it on the Casiano. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so here we have our top series, the Dark series. And you see, they look a little bit different than Casiano or Arcona because you see just these stripes here in, and many people ask me, well, what about this? And I took some samples for you to check here, so please give it a round. You see, this is aluminum. It's not wood, and the Casiano and the Arcona the cabinets are made of wood, of MDF. And why aluminum, or why this technique? In the 90s, in 95, I built up a speaker of the cabinet made of aluminum. We had a wall on the left, a wall on the right, and put everything together. And after some weeks, we got the cabinets made of aluminum, and we built in the drivers and listened to music. And shall I say, it sounded terrible, really terrible. It sounded like a bell. It was such an intrinsic sound of the metal covering the music, so that after some seconds, stop it. It's really annoying. And we couldn't. We took some bitumen inside. We brazed it inside. We tried everything, but the aluminum was vibrating, and the resonances of the cabinets was just swinging around. And if you put your hand on the cover, it vibrated very much. And so I stopped this technology. Said, okay, sorry, aluminum is not good for loudspeaker building. And then in 2010, we just thought about building loudspeakers of MDF. And what we can do, sorry, what we can do to improve the sound. Because the Casiano and the Vescova were downstairs, were really good. We had the ceramic drivers, the diamond tweeters, and we had wonderful music with the Casiano and the Vescova. But as a physicist, you always try to get more, to get better, to improve the sound. And we had these steep filters, we had the drivers, we had very good components inside. And so we thought, what can we do to improve the sound? And of course, the last thing is the cabinet. The cabinet of a loudspeaker is just very important because it swallows the energy which is radiated to the back. Every driver is 50% of the energy is radiated in front, 50% into the back. And you have to absorb this energy inside the cabinet. And the cabinet just starts to vibrate and ring with this energy. And this ringing and vibrating is just really terrible for the sound of speakers. Some manufacturers say, okay, we don't need a cabinet, just make front and speaker inside and forget about the cabinet. But then the problem is the energy thrown back is just thrown to the wall, reflected. It's out of phase with this, and so they cancel. And if they cancel, you have no real bass, and you have always a frequency response like that. Addition, cancellation, and so on. And you also need a big front. Otherwise, you have no bass at all. So you need a cabinet. You need a cabinet. And then we just came upon the idea not to make walls, the left and the right, but to create single ribs like we have it here and stack them one over the other, thus creating a cabinet of a loudspeaker. We first did it in MDF, and this was the Berliner series. It was very, very successful all over the world. Berliner was just a big hit for us because the cabinet really was really quiet. The trick is these ribs here, they cannot be excited by the drivers because they stand right 90 degrees to the motion. and between each rib there's a damping rib. This damping rib is made up of a fibers, and they dampen up and absorb the energy, and they prevent the transmission of sound from one rib to the other. So even if this rib is vibrating, this one and this one will not. And with this technology, I had a big success. But then, of course, the next step comes. What can we do to improve even this? And then I said, okay. Now the old idea of using aluminum as a cabinet material can come true. Because now I don't have the problem that the resonances are ringing up and down and from back and forth. Because now the damping is inside the walls itself. And the ribs are so stiff, you've seen it, that you really can get no energy into these ribs. And with this technology, we just built our 4th series. You see Arcona A, Berliner B, Casiano C, so now it's D, dark, dynamic aluminum rib construction. The Berliner series was also called RC, rib construction, Berliner RC. And now we have here the DARC series, the dark series, with ribs made of aluminum. Massive covers, massive foot, and 5 different models. I've just brought them with me here. You see, this is the small Arcona 60 standing just down on the 1st floor. A dark 60, dark 80, dark 100, and this is the dark 200. It's model 1 to 5, which we will play now. Because we never know when we design a speaker if the speaker is played in a big room or a small room, if it's placed in the corner or free like here. And so we decided to give a possibility to adjust these dark speakers to the living rooms. So we have some bridges here, jumpers, something like that. And we can have 3 possibilities for bass. So just you take this and put it in this position. Then you're linear in bass. The same is true for the highs. Some living rooms are very reverberant, and if we make the highs just linear, it's too much because there are so many reflections from the glass and the marbles. And so we can take it and put it in the position minus 1.5 dB, the highs, just to bring the highs down and adjust it to the room. This helps a lot because we never know what kind of damping material is inside, if we have a carpet or if we have curtains or not. And it has shown all over the years that such an adjustment to the room is really bring a big advantage. So if you're by a dark speaker, you have a lot of possibilities for adjusting it into the room, and it's always good to think about having also the right kind of damping inside. If you have no damping inside, you will not be really satisfied with the sound of any speaker. And you will also do not feel cozy in your home, and that's the big problem. Many people always call me and say, Mr. Gauder, what can I do? Shall I buy a digital sound processor to adjust my system to the room? And then I say, no, digital sound processor doesn't help. Well, what can you do? You can cut off the bass and the highs, but then you lose all the music. And digital sound processor is just changing the sound, but it's just not changing the reflections of the walls and the ground. And so it's better to use some damping materials, like normal materials, a carpet curtains or a bookshelf, plants or blankets, pillows, and that's giving a natural environment for you sitting in your room, and then you feel much more cozy and comfortable at home, and you can listen to music much, much better. So most of the time I'm talking about room acoustics, not about loudspeakers. Yeah, that's a big problem. People are saying, I have a system of 100,000 euro, but actually it sounds like a transistor radio for €1. Yeah, it's true because of the poor environments we have now. And the architects, they only think in an optical way. They just go into a room and see it optical. They don't hear it. I always think they lose their ears when they go to architecture studio. But they have 1 semester of acoustics. They all must go through acoustics, but I think they forget everything when they're out of the examination. And then we have a wonderful, bright living rooms with no carpet, no curtains, no bookshelf, no plants, no blankets, no pillows, but a lot of echoes and reverb. The company is in Stuttgart, and we do most of the things by ourselves. We create the cabinets. We have a milling machine for cutting out the PCBs for the crossovers, and we put all the components by hand on the PCBs and solder them and put the cables on it. And so everything is done by hand in our company in Renningen. Renningen is just close to Stuttgart. On the left, 10 kilometers Porsche. On the right is 10 kilometers Mercedes-Benz. So that's our area where we are in. And if you want to visit our company, you're always invited to come. Just call me when you're in the region area, and then you can take a look inside what we do. And of course, you can also have a listening session in our listening room. The next thing is, if we have a technical upgrade, just like for the Casiano down there, you can always bring your old speaker and we make the technical upgrade. We do this for Berliner, we do this for Casiano Vescova. Now the latest version we heard below, it's the Casiano Black Edition. And if you have a Casiano MK1, you can bring it and we make the upgrade to MK2 Black Edition. The next thing is the choice of the amplifiers. The Arconas just took a little bit of current because they go down deep in bass. You hear it from the small cabinet. And some amplifiers are not strong enough for that. For that we just, or if you have a tube amp with 7 or 8 watts, for this we just have a thing that's what we call bass extension on all our speakers. And you can take it out and then the impedance goes up and you don't need a lot of current. And then also small amplifiers or tube amplifiers can work pretty good and you can play really loud with them. The bass is not as deep as before, but you can use your amplifier. No, okay. Thank you.